One of the phenomenal things about the Spider-Man universe is that it is actually several universes.
We have 50 years of publications, 50 years of story. To make a hero strong, you have to beat the hell out of him and see how much one can take.
Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery is probably the greatest one of any of the Marvel heroes. The characters just came one after the other. They were unique, they were weird, they were individual. No two were terribly alike.
It's so hard to come up with new villains because just like with a superhero, you have to give every villain some sort of a superpower or a super ability because the villain has to be at least as powerful as the hero. So I had done so many villains for Spider-Man, I was trying to think of something different.
Well, the Sinister Six have actually rotated several times in terms of who the members are, but they are a group that was brought together originally to kill Spider-Man.
The members of the Sinister Six have changed over time. So to say the Sinister Six is actually a misnomer because there are different iterations of the Sinister Six throughout the history and the different iterations of the Spider-Man universe and canon.
Doc Ock was the leader because he's the alpha Spider-Man villain. He was brilliant, quirky, and after the accident that fused the arms to his body, he was insane. But he was brilliant insane. And so really, Doc Ock was it. He was the pinnacle of Spider-Man's enemies. The Green Goblin would probably be next. The Green Goblin was a huge mystery for years because nobody knew who the Green Goblin was. He was also a master manipulator. He was less overt than Doc. We didn't find out who he was until 4 years into the comic book series. Sandman, interestingly enough, has an origin very similar to the Hulk. He was an escaped criminal who got caught in an atomic blast. From a distance, it irradiated him. He was on a sandy desert. It gave him the ability to turn his body to sand. Like Spider-Man, so much of this was based upon the science of the day, although comic book science, that a lot of the villains from that time came out of the laboratory. The Lizard, again, the accident in the laboratory. Dr. Connors was trying to find a way that a human being might be able to actually regrow a lost limb. Unfortunately, by using serums that came from lizards, it transformed him. Mysterio is funny. He came straight out of film. He was a special effects stuntman. Everything he did was a trick, but he was really good at it. At one point, he was so good at it that he actually had Spider-Man convinced that he was going insane. Electro, again, just an ordinary guy who is working the high wire, gets struck by lightning, and suddenly he can generate electricity. Again, it's one of those things where it's still sort of science-based because it's electricity, it's not magic. But he was a guy who just then turned to crime because he suddenly could generate electricity. Kraven is probably the odd man out. He's a guy who's sort of, what if Steve Irwin was a supervillain? He wanted to do all of these, I will hunt the greatest animals of the world. I'm now going to hunt the greatest prey. It'll be Spider-Man. The Vulture was a funny one because he was self-made in that he was using an electromagnetic device to fly. But he was very cool because he wasn't handsome, he wasn't dynamic, he was this grizzled old guy, but he could fly. The Rhino was created to be their enforcer and thug. And he was a guy completely encased in this exoskeleton that gave him extraordinary invulnerability. He was already strong, but it enhanced his strength, and he literally just became a walking rhino.
I ask you to put your mechanized paws in the air.
Never!
Amazing Spider-Man Annual 1 was fascinating for several different reasons. First of all, it was the first time that you really saw all of that power coming at Spider-Man all at once. But none of them really liked the idea of working together. Each of them thinks, oh, it was luck that he beat me. I could beat him if I had another chance. So Doc Ock comes up with this really poorly conceived idea of this gauntlet. And Spider-Man, because he's trying to rescue Betty Brant, J. Jonah Jameson's secretary, and his own Aunt May, who happened to be with Betty when she was kidnapped, Spider-Man is frantic to defeat these guys. So he moves briskly from one to the next, just goes, kicks ass each time really quickly until he finally gets to the end and the confrontation with Dr. Octopus. From a storytelling perspective, it's a great idea because if you have a comic book where they all pile on him and beat him, that's the end. It allowed Steve to do absolutely beautiful full-page panels. It's gorgeous artwork. It's the longest single Spider-Man story to date, more than 40 pages, and it's just an extraordinary event. Spider-Man Annual 1 is probably the first real overt manifestation of the Marvel Universe. In that comic book, you have guest appearances and cameos by every other major Marvel character except the Hulk. And Stan Lee was writing or editing every single book in the line. So he knew each of these characters. It made sense that he would be able to pull them all together.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference.
The reason there was a gap of 30 years between the first appearance of the Sinister Six and the next one, I think part of it is because Spider-Man can beat individual villains, but the idea that when 6 villains of this sort get together that they can't beat him makes it kind of difficult to do that kind of a story. Also, I think that there's the sense of people not necessarily just wanting to do a duplicate of the same story. Eric Larson was the artist, David Michelinie was the writer. They finally decided to do the Return of the Sinister Six, and they did this as a multi-part storyline in Spider-Man's own title. They did a lot of homages to the original. There were, again, a lot of cameo appearances, a bunch of full-page pictures, and it lasted over several issues of the title. I believe at the same time there was a Nintendo video game, and that probably had some influence on whether or not they do it again. But you could also tell that David and Eric were really excited at getting to do their spin on this amazing classic story. The Return of the Sinister Six was followed in another Spider-Man title by The Revenge of the Sinister Six. And that's the one where they really fight all of the villains against Spider-Man, and he has a great deal of help. So what started years ago as cameos now become active involvement by the Marvel heroes. The Sinister 12 took the idea of the Sinister Six in a different direction. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, was in prison. He wanted to force Spider-Man to help break him out. And he had the criminals kidnap Aunt May specifically to force Spider-Man to work with them to get him out of prison. And it was all of the Sinister Six. In that storyline, because there were so many villains, Spider-Man had to have a lot of help. Because what you basically have to do when you have an army of villains is you have to counter it with an army of heroes. The Ends of the Earth went back to the basic storyline. And here you had Doc Ock, Electro, the Rhino, the Chameleon, and the Sandman again. In this one, Doc Ock has been very badly incapacitated. His body is a wreck and he's dying. And in this storyline, he is appearing to extort a great deal of money from the world because he has figured out a device that will speed up the greenhouse effect or stop it. What he really wants to do is he wants to take the world with him. He wants to destroy the world using this to burn it up with the greenhouse effect. And so this is the point at which, to get all of the technology he needs, he utilizes the Sinister Six again. The Ultimate Six is an alternate universe, as it were. When they created the Ultimate Universe, they went back as if telling each of these stories from the very beginning. So you have Peter Parker in high school being bitten by the spider for the first time. The logic was, after all these years, there are a lot of readers who might not be reading comic books because how are you ever going to get the thousands of comic books that came out between the beginning and now? But if you have your own universe, one that you can start from the beginning, it'll be really exciting. And in it, the Green Goblin gathers the Sinister Six, and they become the Ultimate Universe's Sinister Six. So the Green Goblin so loathes Peter Parker that he's determined that Spider-Man will be the 6th member. and he's going to be a criminal because he's been forced to, because again, Aunt May has been kidnapped, and if he doesn't, the Goblin won't hesitate to kill her. Doing Sinister Six films is going to be a huge challenge. Part of the problem is that your main characters are not characters you can root for. On the other hand, traditionally, villains are often more interesting than heroes because you actually don't know what they're going to do. They don't have to act like heroes. They don't have to follow their own code necessarily. And not knowing what they're going to do can be very, very exciting.
If there's a way that the Sinister Six can become heroes, where you're rooting for them, where the six bad guys have to fight something that's even worse than they are, and they are, by coincidence, their agenda is aligned with the forces of good, I think that would be kind of an interesting avenue into that. Whether or not that works, I don't know.
When you make a movie this size that has so much influence on the world for that matter, I think today we have more movie fans than comic book fans that got to know Peter and Spider-Man, and they respect him, they love him, they want to be him. So one of the things you want to do is pay homage to the books. You want to pay homage to what are the big events.
Gwen! So I think what got us really excited about the world of Spider-Man was knowing how deep the well is there, knowing the universe of characters, and all of the different things that Peter goes through as a character. You could never possibly put that into one movie. It would be a terrible movie and the longest movie in the history of time. So rather than do that, I think we all said, let's build a universe correctly, and let's let the story keep evolving, and let's make sure each movie is a big emotional step for Peter, and that the bad guys have a reason to find each other and build this group of the Sinister Six over the course of 2 or 3 movies.
Here's the real story. At the end of the first movie, there was some lightning with the man in the shadows.
Hello, Doctor. Did you tell the boy?
Tell him what?
Did you tell the boy the truth about his father?
Working on it with Jamie Vanderbilt, there was an idea that maybe this would be the Electro character. But again, we shot it, and it kind of emerged into some other situation, which the Man in the Hat is now, we think of him as the Gentleman, who is a benefactor of the Sinister Six. Part of the building up of the universe has been dedicated to creating ongoing villains that emerge in different and interesting ways.
I think there may be another way to get what you're looking for. Somewhere off books called special projects.
Special Projects is where we're setting up the Sinister Six and all the different crazy technology from Oscorp that's been developed sort of off the grid. And this is our cryogenic, obviously this should be seen only after the movie, but this is our cryogenic head case for Norman Osborn so we can bring him back for the sequel. This is our Special Projects division where you see all the crazy going on down here.
Warning. Your user access has been revoked.
There's a moment in the movie where he is thrown out, humiliated, set up, kicked out of Oscorp.
Get him out.
And he's desperate for 2 things. He's desperate for revenge, and he's desperate for the blood of Spider-Man.
Special projects. Most recent entry, 1 hour ago.
And he knows that there is, in the bowels of Oscorp, in some place called Special Projects, hidden, some of the residual blood from the original experiment that Richard Parker did.
One of the early conversations that Webb and I had about Oscorp involved Kubrick, 2001, for a sense of the future. So Special Projects is a bunker that no one in Oscorp knows about. It's down below. And the idea was that if you somehow figured out, or by accident, ended up getting the only elevator that stops there to get you to that floor, even then, you would still think you're in some kind of a industrial core in the basement of Oscorp. We designed it to have these big blowers and be made of rougher cement and steel. However, upon interfacing with the special magic keyboard that every room in this movie seems to have, up go the walls, revealing these secret vaults. So Special Projects is the place where we're going to learn about some of the other characters.
What is all this stuff? The future.
But it's also where we find the Goblin suit. So it needed to somehow be a very futuristic place, and at the same time, and in a certain light, be something that you wouldn't think twice about if you walked through.
My inkling of it is that they all emerge from Oscorp, and that they are corralled by the Gentleman, who is a character that's somewhat more recent in the Marvel universe, but someone who I think is intriguing.
How many men did you have in mind?
I want to keep it small. Everything you need is already at Oscorp.
They are sort of the mercenaries of Oscorp, and the most unruly, beastly set of characters.
In Oscorp Special Projects, we get hints at, there are glimpses of, there are implications of the accoutrements of villains that will either be in the Sinister Six first iteration or will eventually move through the Sinister Six.
Welcome, Mr. Fierce.
Who's our first volunteer?
Alexei Sitsevich, currently serving a life sentence. He is most eager to join us.
It certainly ends with me being in place to do that kind of thing, a Sinister Six thing, and so presumably that could happen, sure, absolutely, but it's a need-to-know basis, clearly.
The Sinister Six, that was a name I made up, the Sinister Six, and I got 6 guys, and to me, they were all great.
So we got this company called Blur, Tim Miller, to start designing the elements of the Sinister Six, the hardware of the Sinister Six, which is something that's hinted at in the movie and, of course, the main on ends. It's tricky because we're not exactly sure if all those people are going to be in the Sinister Six or even in the next movie. Like the Mysterio mask, I just think looks really cool, and I love Mysterio, but we haven't all agreed on it. But I just forced it in because I thought it looked cool. The philosophy I had for the end of the movie was war drums.
Mark was worried that coming on the heels of Gwen's death, Spider-Man battling Rhino, he wanted the audience to leave with a positive, upbeat moment, and the title sequence was meant to help that along with the music.
That's what I wanted to do. I was like, well, I want war drums. I want there to be a revolution that's starting, and I want us to walk out of the theater really curious to know what happens next, because that's the only thing really that's going to bring Spider-Man back, is that need to defend the village, and that village is about to be under siege.
When we started looking at the designs or the ideas for how to do the Bane on Ends, initially, the Sinister Six was actually not part of the ideas. There were a lot of different ideas where it was just fun images of the recap of Spider-Man through the movie. And then it became important for us to establish that the Sinister Six were going to have a huge role in the next movie. And the Bane on Ends would be a great way to introduce enough clues to say, well, who are the Sinister Six? So we started looking at picking iconic symbols to represent each of the Sinister Six, but keep it abstract enough so that you weren't sure who they were, but you recognized a Doc Ock arm, part of a glider, a spear, a mask, and then you can infer from that who the Sinister Six could be. And Jennifer Miller and Tim Miller at Blur came up with really beautiful designs of introducing first schematics and then wireframe and then actually macro views, the fully rendered form of that particular symbol, and then that was rolled into the title sequence.
And so the creation of the Bane on Ends was about anticipating the terror that's around the corner and the need for the hero to protect us.